So a couple years ago, I decided to review Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex and Crash Twinsanity. They were both awful. I tried and failed to be funny. The footage was dog water, and most of the things I said about these games I don't really agree with. Well, that's partially true. Most of the things I said about Wrath of Cortex I still agree with, but Twinsanity... Well, let's just get into it. But first, a little history lesson.
So Universal Interactive, the original company that published the Crash Bandicoot games, were not very good publishers at all. They were supposedly very hard to work with, which resulted in Naughty Dog cutting ties with them. And while this may have been for the better for Naughty Dog, for Crash, it was very different. Because Universal owns the Crash Bandicoot license, so if Naughty Dog was leaving Universal, it meant leaving Crash behind as well. Not that it was a bad thing. We got the Jak and Daxter series, which was amazing. But as for Crash, well, we got Crash Bash from Eurocom, which was, well, we'll talk about that another day. But eventually, Crash ended up in the hands of Traveler's Tales, and this led to the creation of Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, developed by Traveler's Tales Knutsford, and Crash Twinsanity, developed by Traveler's Tales Oxford. And while Traveler's Tales was honored to have the Crash series in their hands, they had to deal with Universal Interactive, which, as I stated earlier, weren't very good to work with. And it's ultimately because of this that Wrath of Cortex and Twinsanity are the way they are. So, let's get started with the first Crash Bandicoot game I ever played, The Wrath of Cortex. Wrath of Clemish, as I stated earlier, was the first Crash game I ever played, so obviously out of all of them, this one is the most nostalgic to me. I still remember being super fascinated with the box art, seeing this orange fox looking motherfucker in the mech suit, some angry man on television, and this suspicious yet intimidating looking silhouette gave me this cartoony Star Wars-esque feeling. I just get instant nostalgia looking at this. I also just recently rebought this game for the third time on GameCube for no reason, which means yes, I own every version of this game, and of the 3 ports, the Xbox is definitely the best in my opinion. But my nostalgia and insanity aside, I personally do not think very highly of Wrath of Cortex. I made a review of this game several years ago that I don't recommend you watch because, as I stated earlier, it was awful. Despite my old review of the game being a giant hump of trash, my opinion since that review hasn't really changed much. And if you haven't seen that review, then allow me to get into my thoughts. Crash Bandicoot 4... Oh shit. I can't call it that anymore. Shoot. Okay. Wrath of Cindy Vortex is probably the most mediocre Crash Bandicoot game in the entire series. It's not a terrible game, but it's definitely lackluster. Wrath of Coconuts doesn't really bring anything new in terms of gameplay. It's essentially a rehash of Crash 3 with a Traveler's Tales spin on it. And you know what? That's fine. I mean, yeah, it would have been nice to have something new and original, but I'm the type of person who will like a game regardless of its originality. As long as the game is fun to play at the end of the day, no harm done. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom doesn't have a single original idea in it, and I, along with many other people, think that game is pretty damn good, especially for a licensed game. Unfortunately, however, Wrath of Cortex isn't really that fun. The trend of unfocused gameplay that Wart started continues and is even worse here. In fact, I don't even know if you can even call this a platformer, because if it was, you wouldn't be rolling around in a ball, riding a minecart, controlling a plane, a spaceship, your sister, making Beatles references, or controlling this god-awful mech suit for the majority of the game. Now, to be fair, some of the vehicle levels aren't that bad. I get a kick out of the atmosphere, but the majority of them just make me want to hang myself. and contrary to what I said several years ago, the levels where you just platform as Crash or Coco are so cheaply made. It legitimately feels like the developers made a bunch of assets and dumped them into a linear structure without utilizing those assets in an interesting way. I mean, some levels like the Gauntlet does utilize them in a fun way, but these levels are about as rare as finding true love. And honestly, the platforming levels themselves are the easiest in the entire series, even easier than the GBA games, and that's fucking sad. The hazards themselves don't really pose much of a threat, they just feel so lazy. Like, look at these two lab assistants. They just keep throwing at the same spot over and over and over again. All of the enemies and hazards just feel so half-assed. One of the running themes in Wrath of iCarly is that there are nitros fucking everywhere. I don't mind if a Crash game starts shoving loads of nitros in your face. However, if they're going to be in damn near every level, then the nitros themselves lose their intimidation value. Instead of being a hazard that you should always avoid like the coronavirus, the nitros just begin to feel like another generic obstacle you just run by. The platforming levels themselves just feel so clunky. Crash's controls, specifically his mid-air controls, just feel really floaty. It's kinda hard to explain. The best way I can describe it is that Crash and Coco's jumps don't really feel like they have any real weight to them, and while they aren't awful, they don't feel as fun as they did in the original games. Now, despite the gameplay not being very good, there are a few non-gameplay elements about Wrath of Karamba that I really like. For one, this would be the introduction to one of my favorite Crash Bandicoot characters, Crunch Bandicoot. I like how he's evil in this game, and then by the end, he becomes a permanent member of the Bandicoots. That is until It's About Time decided to retcon every game past Warped, but that's besides the point. I also like the Warp Room. The Warp Room in this game looks dope as fuck, and I love it. Okay, so the last thing I'll say about Wrath of okay, this joke has ran its course, so I'm going to stop here, Tex, is its soundtrack. Oh boy. This soundtrack is the fucking bomb. It is one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time, and it is no doubt the best soundtrack in the entire series. And yeah, I'm a little biased, but oh my god, I cannot put into words how fucking good this soundtrack is. Just listen to the remixed Crash Warp theme. They changed up the bass line and it sounds much better than that bass that Crash Warped was going for. And not only that, every level has their own theme. Well, except if you're playing the Xbox or GameCube version where Medieval Madness shares the same theme as the Gauntlets for some bizarre fucking reason. The music this time around is definitely more based around synths rather than percussion, and while it doesn't sound like Crash music, that sure as hell doesn't mean it's bad in any sense of the word. But aside from that, that's all I'm gonna say about Wrath of Cortex. I could go on about how the graphics are bad or how the monkey bar climbing is ungodly slow, but that'd be way too easy. All you need to know is that I don't really like Wrath of Cortex very much. I used to come back to it more often, but I kept asking myself, do I like it because it's fun, or do I like it because it's nostalgic? And after recently replaying the game again, I realized that I mainly come back to this game because of the nostalgia. Like I said, this was the very first Crash Bandicoot game I ever played, and I won't lie, if it weren't for this and the next game I'm going to talk about, I wouldn't be a die-hard Crash Bandicoot gamer. But if I let go of the past and look at the game for what it is, it's incredibly mediocre. Thankfully though, the next game is an improvement. While Wrath of Cortex was the first Crash game I ever played, Twinsanity would be the second. I kinda have a weird relationship with Twinsanity. For the longest time I considered it my favorite Crash game, but now coming back to it... Okay, something I should just state right off the bat in case you don't know, Crash Twinsanity is infamously known for having a wide variety of glitches and cut content due to rushed development. Even though I used to love Crash Twinsanity as a kid, I absolutely dread coming back to it as an adult. And that's not because I think the game is bad, but the game makes me feel unfulfilled. When I play Crash Twinsanity, I feel like I'm playing a demo of what's supposed to be a full game. Not counting the main open hub areas, Crash Twinsanity has a grand total of 14 levels, which is lame, but a short game doesn't have to be a bad game. A game can be short, but still fun. Unfortunately though, Crash Twinsanity continues the trend of unfocused gameplay, and you see that as soon as you look at the back of the box. Instead of controlling a wide variety of vehicles, you get Cortex. Yeah, this is the main selling point of the game, having Crash and Cortex team up. And you get a variety of gameplay styles with him along with 2 other playable characters. But like I said, the game is only 14 levels long, and when you see this many gameplay styles on the back of the box, there's gonna be a problem. I'm not gonna spend time analyzing every single gameplay style, as there would really be no point to it. Most, if not every gameplay style only comes in 1 or 2 levels at most. Like, what is the point of dedicating 2 entire levels to Nina and Cortex if those are the only 2 levels you get to play as them in? Well, you already know why. It's because there were supposed to be more levels, but the developers didn't have time to add them. The trend of unfocused gameplay in this game is mainly due to how much content that had to be cut from it. It's quite obvious that we were going to spend much more time with these different gameplay styles, but the developers just didn't have time to flesh them out. That doesn't excuse the unfocused gameplay, but it definitely gives you some insight as to why it exists. But likewise to Crash Warp, despite the gameplay being incredibly unfocused, I still think the game we're left with is pretty good. The traditional Crash Bandicoot platforming stages are actually really fun. Hell of a lot better than Wrath of Cortex, that's for sure. The game is still linear, but you're no longer running down a hallway, but wherever you want. Crash Twinsanity goes full on free roam, and that's probably the best part of the whole game for me. A lot of people think that Crash should always stick to the hallway-esque gameplay, but I personally disagree. Crash Twinsanity is just filled to the brim with personality. It's very reminiscent of early 2000s kids shows from Nickelodeon. I like how all the loading screens are drawings of Crash and Cortex doing random bullshit you're going to be doing in the game. I like how neat the pause screen is, the fact that every level in the area has their own title card slapped dead center of it. I like that you can actually explore Insanity Island and see Crash's little chill area on the beach, and his house. I like how every character has their own game over screen. I like how every cutscene is constantly trying to make you laugh. I like how they straight up reference the fact that the game was rushed. I just really like this game's personality, and that's probably the reason why I've considered this my favorite Crash game for so long. But over the years of me playing this game, I slowly started to realize that personal charm doesn't really make a game fun. It can make a game better, but it can't make it a fundamentally fun game. Like I said earlier, the gameplay is extremely unfocused and it makes the game really hard to come back to. I don't want to come back to this game only to play the same 2 Dokamak stages, the same 1 Cortex stage, or go through the trouble of watching the unskippable cutscenes. It's not because the levels themselves suck, it's because they're not fleshed out. Like I said, some of the gameplay styles only come for 1 or 2 levels. The gameplay style that gets the most attention outside of Crash himself are the ones where you control Crash and Cortex at the same time, and a lot of people consider this the best gameplay style in the game. I personally disagree. Cortex doesn't do anything, he just stands there waiting for you to spin him, being open to enemy attacks and hazards. For someone who claims to be the greatest evil scientist in the world, you sure as hell are oblivious to your surroundings. It's only when Crash throws Cortex is when he's like, oh, I actually have a life, let me go live it. He just feels like a tool, which I get is the joke, but I wish they could have implemented the team-up mechanic in a way that actually feels like Crash and Cortex are working together, rather than just, throw me over there and I'll flip the switch for you. It's as basic as you can get with team-up mechanics. But yeah, the last thing I'm going to talk about regarding Twinsanity is its soundtrack. Twinsanity's soundtrack is a controversial topic when people talk about this game. You either really like it, or you really hate it. Me? I love it. I absolutely love it. It's not as good as Wrath of Cortex, but I can really get a groove on while listening to these songs. It's amazing how every song was done in a cappella. My only gripe with it is that while it fits with the tone and personality this game has, it sounds nothing like traditional Crash Bandicoot music, and this is probably one of the reasons why some people hate this game's soundtrack. And while yes, I personally like this soundtrack, I like my Crash music to sound, crashy. With all that said, I think Twinsanity is just an average good game. I consider the game to be better than Crash 1, but still not as good as Crash 2 or 3. Despite that, I still think the first 3 games set the foundation for future Crash games, Twinsanity just being one of them. A lot of people think that Twinsanity would be the perfect candidate for a remake or a remaster of some degree with all the planned content put back in. Even though I'd rather have brand new original games, I'm honestly not against the idea of Twinsanity getting this treatment. Like I said, Twinsanity has lots of cut content. I've even spent 10 minutes talking about one of the most infamously cut levels in the game. And as I said at the start of this Twinsanity segment, Twinsanity, to me, feels like a demo of what's supposed to be a more complete game. And I would absolutely love to see this game get a reimagining or an extended cut of some type. Twinsanity is the definition of lost potential, and I would love to see that potential fully thought through. But as of right now, we only have the PS2 and Xbox original, and while this is, in my opinion, a classic title from that particular era, it's definitely not the best the series has had to offer.
These games honestly mean a lot to me in terms of nostalgic memory. I remember spending hours and hours upon both of them, but I can definitely say that I played much better games down the line, and though the revisit for these games was fun, I can't exactly say I had more fun with them than I did with the original games. That's just my opinion. If any of you disagree, you're free to disagree, and I will respect your opinion no matter what. But we're not exactly done with Crash yet. I've already talked about tag team racing. I'm gonna talk about the spin-off games in a separate video, but oh yeah. The infamous Mutant games. This is gonna be a doozy. Now, this video is gonna probably take a bit longer to get out because I have not played these games since 2015, I think? It's been a pretty long time. And last I remember, I actually liked these games, so hopefully my opinion stays the same. Hopefully. But until next time, I'm the Loaten 17. Thanks for watching.
Oh,